There we are.
Were you muted?
I was muted. Let's put this back in here. All right, there we are. Okay, yay! And that's the recipe for hush puppies at the Ark. So anyway, I hope you got it because I was only given permission once to give it out, and that was it. So man, golly, escargot, really? Oh, God. Couldn't believe that was one of the main ingredients. Oh gosh. So, anyways, we're here. We're talking about the Ark of the Covenant and the measurements, and basically talk about how accurate it is to have that accurate the depiction was in Raiders of the Lost Ark. At least the visual representation, not so much the whole Nazi's face melting part. I'm not saying it couldn't happen. It just we don't know. So you shall make. We've talked about the exterior. There's also the addition on the top of what they're calling a mercy seat. It's made of pure gold, 2.5 cubits long, 1.5 cubits wide. You shall make 2 cherubim of gold, make them hammered work at the 2 ends of the mercy seat. Make 1 cherub at one end and 1 cherub at the other end. And you shall make the cherubim of one piece with the mercy seat on its 2 ends. The cherubim shall have their wings spread upward, covering the mercy seat with their wings and facing one another. The faces of the cherubim are to be turned toward the mercy seat. Now, remember in the movie, and just basically plenty of other depictions, it's had like the two wings that fold inward. This is what they're talking about. You shall put the mercy seat on top of the ark, and in the ark y'all shall put the testimony, which I will give to you. There I'll meet with you, and from above the mercy seat, from between the 2 cherubim which are upon the ark of the testimony, I will speak to you about all that I will give you in commandment for the sons of Israel. So the ark basically represented the presence among God's people, and thus it was kind of a constant reminder of Israel's relationship with God as their provider and their protector, and with the people that are his vassals. It was also a constant reminder of the standard by which they were to live and be judged, because they had these rules that they know these are, consequences happen, and we've always got the rule list right here. Because the reason, and we talked about this last week, the reason for those 10 commandments is not because, we had this big list of new rules, but more because God was basically at the point of, okay, fine, I will spell it out for you, because humanity had their minds so clouded by sin that we had just lost our place in God's kingdom. We've lost sight of it. And so now we've got this constant reminder that we're carrying around the ark for us to always look for. So the mercy seat, essentially a solid lid that was to cover the ark and its contents. It was a symbolic that this mercy seat covered the law, indicating that God intended to provide an avenue for mercy for those who broke his law, which is everyone but Jesus. The whole non-sinning, perfect person thing. The high priest would sprinkle blood on the mercy seat each year on the Day of Atonement to cover all their sins. Some say it represents Jesus entering the true Holy of Holies on our behalf. If you keep going on this, next is a mention of taxes. And this is Exodus 30, 11 through 16. See, we're already at 30. 5 chapters like that. Or if you're watching online, 2 chapters like that. So, what's up?
Is it somewhere? Do we know where the Ark of the Covenant is?
A big warehouse.
There's a big warehouse. Yeah.
Warehouse.
What you got? Suppose.
Let me interject.
Oh, no.
Since I'm a huge proponent of historical.
Sure. And there are lots of Netflix stairs. Yeah.
Places, but
sure.
A lot of people point to the resting place right now is a church in Ethiopia.
Yeah, and I think I saw that one actually. Yeah, but there's also theories that it's in Spain somewhere. There's but yeah, the Ethiopian church is actually one that's the one where they won't let anybody in or out.
I've heard that Spring Antifa too.
You can only see it when the splash pad is open.
Only
So-
during holidays and they're taking bids on it. I sure hope they're not.
It may take you a little longer to get there because of the four-way stop. So you all right?
Yeah, Ethiopia.
Oh, well, yeah, sure.
Yeah, I know.
So Exodus 30, 11 through 16, there's a section about taxes that I know it's not anyone's favorite subject, but I thought it was interesting that we had this sort of basis for it. When you take a census of the sons of Israel to number them, then each one of them shall give a ransom for himself to the Lord. When you number them, so that there will be no plague among them when you number them. This is what everyone who is numbered shall give: half a shekel, according to the shekel of the sanctuary. A shekel is 20 gerahs, to clear it up. Half a shekel is as a contribution to the Lord. Now, the Lord describes what can be labeled as what they're calling a tabernacle tax. And Moses was to take a census, receive a ransom. Hold on to that word, ransom. A half a shekel from everyone 20 years or older, and the money was used to maintain the tabernacle, repairs, that sort of stuff. And also, the word ransom comes back later on in the New Testament. Jesus actually is referred to as a ransom for our debt in Matthew 20, 28, Mark 10, 45, 1 Timothy 2, 6. So this is a reoccurring theme that shows up later on in the scriptures. Exodus 31, verse 7, I've got a summary of all of the items to be built by skilled artisans as they're building the tabernacle. There are so many verses and there's a lot of detail, but we're just, once again, view 50,000 feet. So buckle up. A tent of meeting, which what contained it. We've got the Ark of Testimony, the mercy seat upon it, all the furniture of the tent, which there were specific measurements and detailed decorating instructions. This was like paint by numbers, or it was like the IKEA of tabernacles. Everything has a specific place. Everything has to be a certain way. All the furniture of the tent, the table also, its utensils, the pure gold lampstand with all of its utensils, which was used to, so that the priests could see to do their work. The altar of incense, altar of burnt offering, also with all of its utensils, a laver, lavatory, a sink, and its stand, the woven garments as well, the holy garments for Aaron, who was to be named the high priest, which may not have been the best idea, as we'll see in a minute. The garments for his sons, with which to carry on their priesthood, the anointing oil, the fragrant incense for the holy place. All those things had to be exactly the way the Lord laid them out. And he reminds Moses here that they are to make them according to all that I have commanded. There was to be no independent creativity on the part of the skilled artisans when building the place to worship the Lord. They were to obey God's instructions exactly. Why do you think that's the case? Why did he have to be so strict with all of that?
Maybe so they can take credit for design or get any praise for it.
It does cut down on the ability to take credit. You're right. I mean, if if someone's an artist and they're making these things, they're going to want to say, "I did that. I did this."
If it's built right, it'll last forever. Let's do like with the case of like data by who later on, there's a cost to going against what's prescribed.
Yeah, because what happened to humanity beforehand. We're by this point we have a track record of going off the rails. So we have to be led, spoon-fed it, if you will. So no independent creativity. They were to obey the Lord's instructions exactly. Tabernacle rather. Tabernacle? Is that the adjective form? That looks a little tabernacle to me. The tabernacle was a copy of real things in heaven, according to Hebrews 9. So God insisted that the copy be constructed truly. The tabernacle was a teaching tool, and it spoke constantly of access to the rule and to true and living God through sacrifice and prayer. So we've got all these things laid out the way God wants us to worship. Last week we talked about how quickly the Israelites were ready to jump on board. God, we will do this. We've got it. We're all about this. We'll do it. They quickly said, we'll commit to doing all these things. So things came off the rails very fast. What's up, bud?
Can I go get my iPad? Well, look at my
Hey guys, go back in there and Mom will bring those to you, okay? Sorry. Tablet. You parents understand. There you go. Hey. There we go. So, all right. What's funny is I'm about to talk about Moses with the tablets. And Jack came out to get 2 of them. So that's hilarious. Did you hear that?
Tell him not to drop them and break them.
Yeah, they get into a fight and they smash those things. I'm not as grace-filled as God. So, yeah. So the Lord finished speaking to Moses in verse 31, 18, chapter 31, verse 18. He concludes that section of Exodus that started in Exodus 20 with all of the instructions, all the directions, all specifications. Book of the Covenant was given in 2017 to 33. Then the instructions for building tabernacle and its furnishings were started in 25:1, go all the way to 31:17. God gave the tablets. The Israelites were urged to follow their God wholeheartedly, not half-heartedly, not just because, I guess we'll do this because, but with all your heart, do that. Do not break his covenantal laws because he alone was their God. He's above and beyond all. And they were to trust that God had their best interest at heart. And when you consider that, there's an amount of faith that goes to that because so often we're hit with things maybe not going the way that we want them to go or way that we think they should go. And that's where true faith comes in. Things don't work on our timeline, or thankfully, they don't work within our limited ability to see how things can play out. Often in my life, the times when I've been most pleasantly surprised are the times when I've let go of trying to control a situation. Because what do you know? God shows up and does it in a way that's way better than I could ever imagine. So, the Israelites were to trust God, that God had their best interests at heart, and not stray back to the pagan religions. Because the thing is, there was this major break between the pagan religions and the faith of the one true God. The pagan religions all focused on ways for me to get my way. I want extra rain on the crops, so I'm going to, do this. They could a la carte what they wanted. They could shape the religion to be what they wanted at that time. They worshipped what was convenient for them, or what was, I guess, understandable for them. During a drought, you pray to the Egyptian god for rain. If you want, if it's raining too much, you pray for the Egyptian god for sun. It's almost like they're driving the car instead of God driving the car. So when Moses is up on the mountain for 40 days, mind you, and he's getting the blueprints for the tabernacle, all the time he's up there getting all this stuff, things are coming apart down the hill. The Israelites are losing patience down at the camp. They ask Moses' brother Aaron, to make a golden calf idol so they can worship it as the God who saved them from slavery in Egypt. A golden calf that they can point to and say, that's the God that got us out of Egypt. Because they've gotten impatient. Even as God's presence is hovering up on top of the mountain, remember, we can see the clouds and everything. They're already breaking the first 2 commandments. No idols, no other gods. The people saw Moses being gone as a couple of different things. First, they thought, well, he hadn't come back yet because he's a little ashamed of what he found. Others thought, well, Moses ran off. And if he's not coming back, then we're off the hook for what we promised to do. No harm, no foul. He's not here. Out of sight, out of mind. You know what I'm saying? But the thing is, their slide toward the pagan behaviors, simply because Moses didn't return when they thought he would, shows something that happens even today when we think that God is supposed to act on our timeline. Because that's when people start getting frustrated. That's when people start, letting their faith slide a little bit. They start questioning instead of trusting that God has a plan and it works on God's perfect time. So instead of waiting for Moses to return to them from meeting with the Lord, mind you, a very important meeting, one that you highlight on your to-do list, the people assembled around Aaron and said to him, "Come, make us a god who will go before us." Here they express that Moses was unreliable because they do not know what has become of him. Oh, surely he ran off. Sure. This is another expression of the fundamental problem that people have to know. They have to feel like they're on that inside track. If they don't see, then they don't believe. The thing is, what frustrates me with this is that they have seen. They were led by a pillar of smoke and fire. They saw the plagues. They've seen all of this. So just because it stopped for a little bit, well, let's go back to the old ways.
Parting of the sea should have taken.
You'd think, right? I mean, when everybody, busted into simultaneous song afterwards, yeah. So in the ancient Near East, the calf or the young bull or ox represented fertility and strong power. When the idol was ready, they said, "This is your God, O Israel, who brought you up from the land of Egypt." And they might refer to Aaron and other leaders, because Aaron's sons were the priests there. And Aaron identified this idol as the God who delivered them from Egypt. Remember, Aaron was supposed to be the high priest. He's been on the inside track of all this. So we're a little disappointed in him right now. The phrase, "this is your God," could also be translated, "these are your gods," because the word for God, the Hebrew Elohim, is plural in some cases, your gods, which goes back to that paganistic tendency. And Aaron had second thoughts. Whenever I started getting really excited about all this, Aaron realized, I've messed up. And he told them to build an altar before the calf. Altar to block. Now, it says before the calf. That means in front of it. Basically hide the calf there. And Aaron's actions led to a violation of at least the first three, probably the first four of the 10 Commandments. Foundation of the covenant of Israel had just agreed to. So he's leading people astray regardless. And the next day, the people joined for a big feast. And they worshipped with the feast, made all the offerings. They did all these worship activities that God had laid out. And then they kept going. And they kept doing, then they started doing the paganistic stuff. And then it got real bad to some stuff. And they basically just worshipped on what they wanted at that point, not what God wanted. And on this occasion, at least two, arguably four of the 10 Commandments were broken. So let me ask you this. When it comes to the idolatry thing, why is that dangerous? Why is it dangerous for us to have these false idols?
Because our Lord is a jealous God.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And also, if you let that go too long, if once idolatry is allowed, it pollutes everything else, everything beyond that, and it's tough to get out of. It's tough to eliminate. That's why even today, even wholehearted Christians have a hard time with stuff like that because we start to idolize without even realizing we're idolizing. Whether it's it doesn't have to be a statue on the wall. It doesn't have to be in a courtyard. It doesn't have to be a golden calf. It can be football or your job or your car or it can be all kinds of things. Jenny and I were watching something on Netflix the other night about folks that were getting emotional with old religious artifacts, and it was just a part of one of these documentaries we were watching, and we ended up cutting it off just because I was like, okay, oh my gosh, this is all idolatry. This you're not. This is it's supposed to be an object based in Christian history, but at the same time, you're treating this object as if it were God. You're not worshiping God anymore. You're worshiping this object. So I mean, it's dangerous. It slips in, and we don't even realize it's happening until we're all the way in and we're crying at this new car or something. So the Lord saw what the people were doing down the hill, and so He told Moses, "Hey, guess what your guys are doing?" He tells him to go down at once, for your people whom you brought up from the land of Egypt have corrupted themselves. Get that He said, your people, not my people. When they're misbehaving, they're your people. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Oh, when they're being sweet and nice, oh, they're my kids. But guess what your son did today? I mean, So God decides they need punishment. So the Lord says to Moses, I've seen this people, and behold, they are an obstinate people. And the word obstinate can also be translated as stiff-necked, which when you have a stiff neck, you can't bow your head. Meaning the people were not willing to bow in submission to the Lord's authority. Their neck was stiff. And they wouldn't bow. They bowed to the calf, but they would not bow before the Lord. It's because the calf did their bidding. The calf worked for them. The calf was the genie in the lamp. That sort of mentality there. So the Lord says, let me go alone. And He's ready to punish all of them except Moses. Moses, you stay here. I'm going to go take care of this real quick. And Moses starts stepping up for his people. Moses starts talking about all the reasons why God should let them be forgiven for this. He begins his intercession with the words, "O Lord," immediately being humble. Mom, who I love the most, I'm sorry I broke your lamp. Yeah. Moses pleads with God and begins making points about God's covenant with Egypt. And God gives, not because God had any sort of need to be convinced, but it was a test for Moses. Are you going to intercede on behalf of your people? Moses obeys the Lord and descends the Mount Sinai carrying the 2 tablets of the law. He returns to the Israelite camp, saw the golden calf and what was going on, starts smashing the covenants. Smashing the tablets. And when he does that, it's a symbol of the covenant being broken. So these tablets that are now smashed to tiny bits are a symbol of the Israelites' broken covenant with God. With him he carried 2 tablets of the testimony in his hand, probably the tablets mentioned in Exodus 31:18. Upon them written the 10 commandments, written on both sides, front and back. They were written on one side and the other. It's the only place in the Bible, actually, where it states that. They were written on both sides of the stones. The description was probably added to the text in order to give a stark contrast to the calf idol and its origin, which was sinful man. If we go to Exodus 15:20, verse 20 describes the actions that Moses took in response to what he saw. First, he took the calf, which they had made, and burned it with fire. Oh, he's raining down judgment here. Moses is upset. Takes the calf he made, burned it with fire. This showed the people that the calf god could do nothing to defend itself, and thus was not a real God worthy of worship. He melted it down. It was made by man, now destroyed by man. Second, he ground it into a powder. Destroying the calf completely was an act of disrespect toward it. The calf had no power. It couldn't stop this. Next, he scattered it over the surface of the water. Mixing the powder and water was preparation for what Moses had in store. Next, he made the sons of Israel drink it. Gold powder in water. Can't have been good. Probably unpleasant, to say the least. But by consuming the idol that they'd worshipped, several points were being made. It would show the people that the idol was completely powerless, and it would inevitably become human waste, showing the extent of it being unclean. Thing is, I didn't write that. That was a commentary line that I passed by this afternoon. I was like, oh, clip. Just gonna throw that in, get a reaction there. Exodus 32:21. After making the people drink the dust of their idol, Moses then confronted Aaron about his role in the fiasco. And Aaron, man, that guy tap danced around all of this. Because when you think about what actually happened, they said, Aaron, make us an idol that we can take with us. He forged this thing, and they start having second thoughts about it. Aaron tells Moses the most generic and blame-free version of those events he could come up with. He says, they said to me, make a God for us who will go before us. For this Moses, the man who brought us up from the land of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him. That part was true. As was Aaron's response, I said to them, whoever has any gold, let them tear it off. So they gave it to me, and I threw it in the fire. Also true. Last part's where we start getting a little iffy. Aaron tells Moses that after he put the gold in the fire, out came this calf. Magically. I don't know how it happened. It just showed up. The wording here implies that a miracle happened, which it did not. Perhaps Aaron is attributing the calf to the work of the Lord, but maybe probably not. That'd be the latest in a long list of the Lord's miracles, starting with the plagues on Egypt, the Red Sea crossing, daily supply of manna, so on. So Moses calls for those who were with him to stand up on the Lord's behalf. The Levites did so, and then they were ordered to go through the camp and kill those who were connected to the idolatry, at least the ringleaders, resulting in 3,000 Israelites being killed. Yeah, Moses then urged the people to dedicate themselves to the Lord once again. You better believe they did. Moses offers to God to die or bear the consequences for the people. The Lord rejects this offer and declared that those who committed the terrible sin would suffer consequences. He also commanded Moses to lead the people according to the Lord's instruction and revealed that his angel, rather than he himself, would lead them. Huge downgrade there between having God present in the midst of your travels versus a representative. Moses offers to have himself blotted out from the book of life. He tries to make himself the sole bearer of God's judgment. He's doing everything he can to protect his people, And the Lord forgives the people. He included in his response a command. The Lord told him to go now, lead the people where I told you. Judgment against the idolaters would be executed, but God made it clear that he would preserve many and lead them to the land of Canaan. So at verse 35 here, and it's a kind of a summary in light of this golden cow debacle. True to his word, the Lord smote, which is the past tense of smite, smote the people because of what they did with the calf, which Aaron had made. Now, we don't have a lot of information about this smiting. I'm just conjugating all over the place with that. I don't know. It might be referenced in 1 Corinthians 10:8, which discusses the golden calf episode. It adds, nor let us act immorally as some of them did, and 23,000 fell in one day. However, a lot of people believe this passage is referring to the episode recorded in Numbers 25:9. Those who died by the plague were 24,000. So Exodus 33. Chapter 33 begins with the Lord commanding Moses to tell the people to leave Sinai and begin their journey to the land he promised them. He would guide them using an angel and would guarantee victory in their conquest of the land. Because remember, he'd promised they were going to make it, or their descendants would make it. The devil's in the details here, for lack of a better phrase. When people heard that the Lord would not be leading them from their midst, they went into mourning. They actually took off their ornaments. They were down. They didn't feel like they were worthy of it. In spite of people breaking the covenant with him, in his infinite mercy, the Lord reinstated the covenant. So, okay, we're chill now. And now was going to allow the opportunity for the first generation to be delivered from slavery in Egypt first generation to be delivered from slavery in Egypt to fulfill the promise he made to Abraham by conquering and possessing the land. So once again, that angel, severe downgrade as this angel took the place of the Lord's presence in the midst of the people. And the Lord, he announced that he would no longer reside in the midst of his people. Instead, he met Moses in a tent on the outside of their camp as they traveled. Now, it wasn't that he wasn't there. It wasn't that he had abandoned his people. It was to make a point that, they had gotten used to having this direct line. Oh, God, he's right over there. Right up that mountain up there. They actually had to travel a little bit to get to the place where God was communicating with Moses. And Moses would go into this tent, and there'd be a swirl of smoke, and people would watch him go in, and they would just look reverently at the tent as Moses is there with God. People saw the pillar of the cloud descend upon the tent. They worshiped the Lord by standing in reverence. Moses would enter the tent to fellowship with the Lord like a friend. When he returned to the camp, his assistant Joshua would remain at the tent. And Moses approached the Lord face to face with concerns in the tent of meeting. The Lord had said that he would not go to Israel, to the promised land, or remain in their midst as a result of their sin in chapter 32. First concern was about what the Lord's intentions were concerning the people of Israel. Second concern was about whether the Lord was going to accompany his people as they traveled to the promised land. Awesome. Let us know if you're done having Burning Man in there. So, the cat. So, here we get to actually listen in on a conversation with Moses and God. Get them kind of eavesdrop on it. Moses is concerned with the order for him to lead the people but you yourself have not let me know whom you will send with me. So they go back and forth about Moses leading. Bible does say that the prayer of the righteous makes a big difference. And it's pretty neat to have an account of these sorts of internal discussions, I think it humanizes Moses a little bit and also shows that close relationship with God. So God tells Moses that his presence, his face, shall go with you, and I'll give you rest. But Moses did not rest. He continued his petition before the Lord by saying, if your presence does not go with us, do not lead us up from here. Moses wants to know the ways of God by walking alongside God. And that's through fellowship, that's by countenance. Moses wants to experience all he can of God. And at some point, he's faced with the fact that God says, you can't see my face. You will surely perish if you do. So, in what he calls his favor, that would conform to you guys are missing all the off-camera stuff. This is hilarious. So, Lord said to Moses, I will also do this thing of which you have spoken. The Lord agreed to provide his presence with the Israelites as they go to the promised land. The reason he gave were that Moses had found favor in his sight, and he knew Moses by name, which suggests a close relationship. So we all win because God liked Moses. So we get to Exodus 33, 18 through 23. Moses needed a visible sign that would confirm the Lord's promised presence, so he asked him to make himself visible to him. The Lord answered him by allowing Moses to see his back, but not his face. Why? Because, once again,
He will die.
He will die. He said, I pray to you, show me your glory. Verse 19, and he said, I myself will make all my goodness pass before you and will proclaim the name of the Lord before you. I will be gracious to whom I will be gracious and will show compassion on whom I will show compassion. But he said, you cannot see my face, for no man can see me and live. So Moses got to see the back of God. The Lord repeated, however, that his face shall not be seen. So Moses was allowed to see the Lord's glory from behind, but not his face. It's a huge honor. Doesn't happen often. big props there. The first two requests Moses made God were for the people. The final one was a humble request for himself. So the two tablets inscribed with the Ten Commandments are restored. Moses prepares the two tablets, then takes them to the top of Mount Sinai to meet the Lord. Let's put those tablets back together. So the Lord tells Moses, reconstruct those tablets. Moses meets them back up the next day. They get everything set. He appears in the cloud. Moses does not dispute the reality that people are obstinate. He had experienced this himself, and the Lord declared that he was renewing the covenant with Israel, that he would do miraculous things on their behalf, including driving out those who currently were living in the promised land. What he was going to do was drive out the Amorite before you, and the Canaanite, the Hittite, the Perizzite, the Hivite, and the Jebusites. And those nations had been expelled because their iniquity had filled to the brim. If you go back to Genesis 15:16, it talks about that. It says, then in the fourth generation, they will return here, for the iniquity of the Amorite is not yet complete. In Deuteronomy 9:4, God will later warn Israel that if they follow in the ways of the Canaanites, they will suffer a similar fate at the hands of invaders. God had all this logistically laid out. The Lord warned the Israelites against engaging in idolatry when entering the promised land. Not only were they not to ally themselves with the idolatry that existed in that land, but they were to eradicate every trace of it. So they go in, what's there already, rise above it. Because what's been here has been that pagan idolatry that was there. Don't be a part of that. Instead, you bring your ways. Don't suck up what's there. Having stated the types of worship the Israelites were to stay away from, the Lord outlines the requirements for proper worship. And just to quickly go through a little bit of it, the first item mentioned is that the people were to observe the Feast of the Unleavened Bread. The second principle repeated the law concerning the firstborn. Remember, all firstborn were to be dedicated and redeemed for God. 3 in verse 21, the Lord restated the law of the Sabbath rest. 4 verse 23 contains a summary of the Lord's instructions about the feasts. It stated that 3 times a year, all your males are to appear before the Lord God, the God of Israel. It says males took part in the feast, but we know for a fact later on that it was a whole family thing. A lot of times they say males, they mean families, just because it's just understood that everybody goes with. So all of this is promised by the Lord on a condition that people go up 3 times a year to appear before the Lord your God. So after dictating all these principles, the Lord commanded Moses to write down everything he had said concerning the renewed covenant. Moses did not eat or drink during the 40 days and nights in the Lord's presence while he's redoing all the work. The tablets were also inscribed with the 10 Commandments. So Moses was there with the Lord 40 days, 40 nights. He did not eat bread or drink water. And they didn't freak out because he was gone 40 more days. And created with light because he'd been hanging out with the Father. You'd be happy too. So when Moses was not speaking the words of the Lord to the people, he put a veil over his face so you wouldn't be confused. He removed the veil when he was in the Lord's presence or when he was proclaiming the Lord's words to the people. So as we move on from that, Moses calls upon the Israelites to voluntarily contribute the raw materials for the construction of the tabernacle, its furnishings. This included precious metals that we mentioned before, gold, silver, bronze, cloth. We started all that. You all right? Awesome. So basically everything was once again being specified of how the tabernacle is to be built. The Lord calls for craftsmen, artisans, other skilled workers to come forward for the building of the tabernacle. Remember, once again, it had to be exactly how God laid out. After Moses called for the people to give materials for building the tabernacle and for skilled craftsmen to build it, the people departed from his presence. Men and women who were moved to contribute brought their donations to Moses. First 7 verses of chapter 36 continue the last section of chapter 35 concerning the work, and I'm really rapid firing through these, by the way. All the different specifications about the walls, the boards, where the ark was supposed to be, all that. Once again, the ark was the holiest and the most important object in the tabernacle. The presence of the Lord descended upon it, and the 2 tablets containing the 10 commandments were placed in there. Placed in the Holy of Holies, separated from the other part of the tabernacle by a veil that hung down. You'll remember once we get to the Gospels, that becomes a big deal, that separation there. The table of the showbread, the items required to carry it are constructed. The altar of incense is constructed. The wash basin. Moses recounted the amount of material that was used to build the tabernacle, material for the garments. The Lord commands Moses to set up the tabernacle. Again, the Lord spoke to Moses. He says, this time, he told him that on the first day of the first month, you shall set up the tabernacle of the tent of meeting. This was 1 year after the Israelites left Egypt. Remember, they've only been out a year. A lot has happened. This 1 year after the Israelites left Egypt and about 9 months after they arrived at Mount Sinai. First month was determined from the time Israel left Egypt. Remember, when they left out of Egypt, they were told to start counting time at this moment. So that's day 1, January 1. They're not following the 12-month calendar that we're doing. Yeah, the time starts now. Everything before this was a mistake. So as the modern Western calendar counts from what was presumed at the time to be the birth of Christ, this Exodus calendar started from the month in which Israel departed Egypt. Now that the tabernacle has been erected, Exodus 40, 34, 38, the Lord came to dwell amongst his people. He appeared as a cloud like before, and his glory came to reside in the tabernacle. Here's where things change a little bit, and you get this feeling that the whole mood has changed. The cloud was also connected with the glory of the Lord. Glory means the observed essence of something. As 1 Corinthians tells us, each created thing has its own glory, but once again, the Lord, not a created thing. He's a creator. In this instance, he chose to display his presence in the form of something familiar, a cloud, that behaved in a manner that made it clear it was a miraculous manifestation. At the time, Moses was not able to enter the tent, which is a big change from everything up to this point. Moses is no longer allowed to enter the tent of meeting because the cloud had settled on it and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. Moses had previously met God when his presence was manifested in the form of a cloud, but at this time he was not allowed in the tabernacle when the cloud descended. It could be that this was such a special kind of moment that the Lord wanted to make a clean distinction of this change. The tabernacle was going to outlast Moses. It was not pastor-centric. That's something in the church world we have to really worry about as clergy. We have to worry about whether or not, the church, we have to try to make sure that the church is going to last beyond the time that we're there. You can't have a church that's going to rise or fall with a single pastor. It can't be pastor-centric. And that's kind of, there's a taste of that here, right? God's wanting to show that the tabernacle will outlast Moses. His presence is now to dwell among the people. The people had constructed the tabernacle and had erected it. Now that God's presence had descended, God was making clear that things were different. Not just anyone could walk in, not even Moses. And if you want to find out what happened next, there's the book of Leviticus. Have at it. So all right. I feel like I was running a marathon at the end there, man. So much. So, questions? Anything online? Anybody checking in? Anything?
Janice Giles says hi, Mark.
Hey, Janice. Good to see you. From here, I know that next week we have our fall kickoff at the church at 6:30 at the church. Hopefully on our brand new floors. Yay. It's going to be no cost to anyone. The church is going to cover it. It's going to be breakfast for dinner, which is awesome. Eggs, bacon, sausage, yay. Chose it, and then the next week, I'll get there. Then next week, after Wednesday night supper at 6:30, we'll be having our small group for The Chosen season 4. If you want to catch up, seasons 1, 2, 3 are on Netflix and are on Hulu and Amazon. So, and on the Chosen app. That's right. So go catch up. But we're going to start with the first episode of season 4 and watch all 8 episodes. The format we do is we watch an episode starting at 6:30, and then Jeremy and I kind of lead kind of a little discussion time, a short discussion time afterwards, talking about what was actually biblical and what was extra biblical in those episodes, and pointing out some of the throwbacks. And there's a lot of throwbacks to the Old Testament from the Gospels, and so they illustrate those beautifully within those programs. And so we kind of analyze that a little bit. So that starts the 14th. After that, I think we're having another small group. I think it's a Bible study. I'm not over it, but just keep an eye out for that. And then for Advent, we've got some pretty cool stuff that we're planning for Advent as far as an Advent Bible study as well. So just keep your ears open for that. I know I'm upset too. It's okay. I know. I'll tell them later. Shh. So they're going to beat each other up. There's like 3 kids and they're all bouncing off the walls. So with that in mind, once again, thanks everybody for joining us online. Thanks you guys for being here. We're gonna do this again sometime soon, and you're all invited back, especially if you bring food. Yeah, once again, for the art, the Ostermeyers are awesome, and so yeah. That's right. Sunday, if you want to hang out, you have any questions you think of, if you're watching this after the fact, Pub Theologies at Steel Hall Brewing on Sunday at 4. Come out and hang out with us. We sit for a couple hours and just chat things up. We have some questions that lead the conversation, but it's not like there's an actual organized lesson to it. So yeah, come on. It's a lot of fun. It really is. It's the final one for now. So we're swapping away to do something else on Sunday evenings. So coming out and be part of that. Steel Hall Brewing in downtown Trustful, 4:00 on Sunday. So, all right, guys. See you later. Jenny, if you will do the honors. I'm just going to wave until I'm free.